There are a variety of reasons you might add text to an image, such as to use for a title slide in a slideshow presentation, to add a little pizzazz to printed output, or just to have a little fun with a photo you plan to share. One of the ways you can spice up the text you add to images is to place that text along a path you draw yourself. Let's take a look at this new twist on text. I'm going to choose the Text on Custom Path tool. That tool is accessible below the Type tool, so I'll first click and hold my mouse on the Type tool, and then from the flyout menu, I'll choose the Text on Custom Path tool, and then I can set about drawing a custom path. I'll make sure that my pencil tool is active, and then I can click and draw to create a path in any shape I'd like. I can even change the shape of this path. I'll go ahead and click on the path, and then I can click and drag in individual segments or individual anchor points in order to adjust the shape of that path. So I can fine-tune the shape, perhaps adjust the curve of the path just a little bit, and that looks to be a pretty nice effect. I'll go ahead and click the Commit button, and now I can click on the path itself in order to add text. I'll go ahead and type some text. You can see that in this case, the text is a bit too big for the image and for the path, so I'm going to press Control-A on Windows or Command-A on Macintosh in order to select the text, and then I'll change the font size to something a bit smaller. That's certainly good for a starting point. I can also choose a different font. I'll go ahead and choose a font that looks a little bit more interesting for this image, and I can refine the point size as needed. I'll go ahead and increase the point size in this case, and that looks to be pretty good. In this case, I'm just using the keyboard shortcuts. I'll click inside the point size box and then use the up and down arrow keys, or in this case, the shift up and down arrow keys, in order to change the font size. And of course, I could even change the color of the font. In this case, I think I'll use a color that complements the text. I have a nice range of greens within the image. I think a nice brown shade might work pretty nicely, even though that's not exactly in keeping with the colors that are typical in spring, I suppose. But I think it'll complement the image reasonably well. I'll go ahead and click to commit this text, and of course I could continue refining things as I see fit, and that includes refining the text or refining the path that I'm working on. For example, if I double-click on my text layer, then I can change the text. For example, maybe I'll just change my little sentence here to "Spring means new grasses." I don't know what that means, but that's the only thing that comes to mind at the moment. And I can again choose to select all, Control-A on Windows or Command-A on Macintosh, and then adjust the size of the font. And again, in this case, what I'm doing is clicking in the point size text box and then using the up or down arrow keys in order to change that font size. I'll go ahead and click the green checkmark button on the options bar to commit that change to the text, but I could also change the path itself. I'll go ahead and choose my Text on the Path tool one more time, and I can click on that path in order to activate it again, and I can continue fine-tuning that path. I can drag some of those shapes around. You can see, for example, if I add a bump or a dive in the path, that it changes the shape of that path and therefore changes the direction of the text. I could even delete anchor points on the path if I found that necessary for any reason. I can simply hold the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on Macintosh while clicking on one of the anchor points, and that anchor point will be deleted. And at any time, if I feel that I need to add an anchor point, I can hold the Shift key and add an anchor point. And of course, I could continue the path. If I move past the path and start drawing again, I can draw a continuation of that same path, so that ultimately, if I adjusted my text so that it was long enough to go out into that area, it would follow that path as well. The key thing to keep in mind is that both the path and the text are fully editable. At any time, I can get back in here and refine the effect as much as I'd like. It can take a little bit of practice to move the path in just the right way. You'll notice that there are quite a few anchor points, for example, and getting them aligned just the way you'd like them can be a little bit tricky. One of the things that can be helpful is to focus on the path itself rather than the anchor points as you're making adjustments there, as you're fine-tuning the shape. We'll go ahead and call that good for the moment. I'll click the Commit button, and then of course I might want to apply some effects to this text, so I can go onto my effects panel, for example, and find an interesting effect. Here's a combination glow and drop shadow, for example, where the top of the text will have a glow and the bottom will have a shadow effect. And I could also add an emboss effect to the image if I'd like. That looks to be a little bit too harsh. Maybe I'll choose a slightly different option. That looks a little more interesting, a little more appropriate for this particular text. So I'll go ahead and click the Apply button to apply that effect to the text. With a little practice and some creative thinking, I'm sure you'll find a variety of situations where you can add text on a path to some of the images you want to share with others.